50% of all cancers are preventable. Food choices can significantly change cancer risk. If you're eating what most people call a healthy diet, you might be feeding cancer cells every single day without realizing it. And one of the worst foods isn't junk food. It isn't fast food. It isn't something you'd feel guilty about grabbing at midnight. It's something people pick up at the grocery store thinking they're doing something good for their body, something with a health claim on the front of the package, something that looks responsible. We'll get to exactly what that is, but first, I need you to understand something that most health content never actually explains. Here's the truth most people never hear. Up to 50% of cancers are preventable, not with extreme diets, not with expensive supplements, not with some radical lifestyle overhaul that leaves you miserable, with everyday food choices, the kind of choices you're making right now, 3 times a day without thinking twice. Today, I'm going to walk you through 4 categories of foods that create the exact conditions cancer cells need to grow, not in a scary, overwhelming way, in a practical, clear, you can actually do something about this way. By the end of this, you'll understand what's happening inside your body at a level most people never get access to. And more importantly, you'll know what to do about it. My name is Dr. Kelsey Ololade. I've spent years studying how cancer behaves inside the human body, how it starts, how it grows, what slows it down, and what accelerates it. And the pattern I see again and again across the research, across the clinical data, across the thousands of cases I've studied is always the same. Cancer doesn't just appear randomly. It doesn't fall out of the sky and decide to take up residence in your body for no reason. It grows in an environment we unknowingly help create, sometimes for years, before anything shows up on a scan, before any symptom appears, before anyone even suspects anything is wrong. That's what makes this conversation so important, because by the time most people think about cancer prevention, the environment inside their body has already been under construction for a long time. So let me give you a framework. One simple mental model that will make everything I share with you today click into place. For a cancer cell to grow, it needs 4 things. First, it needs fuel. Cancer cells are hungry. They run almost exclusively on glucose, which is the simple sugar your body produces from carbohydrates. Normal cells can use multiple energy sources. Cancer cells are far more dependent on glucose. Feed them enough of it consistently enough, and you give them the raw material they need to keep dividing. Second, it needs fire. Chronic inflammation is one of the most powerful drivers of cancer progression we know of, not the kind of short-term inflammation that happens when you sprain your ankle and it swells up for a few days. That's normal. That's your immune system doing its job. We're talking about low-grade, persistent, invisible inflammation that simmers underneath the surface for months or years. The kind you don't feel. The kind that quietly damages tissue and creates the perfect conditions for abnormal cells to take hold. Third, it needs signals. Specifically, it needs hormonal signals that tell cells to grow and divide. Insulin is one of the most powerful. IGF-1, which stands for insulin-like growth factor 1, is another. When these signals are chronically elevated in your blood, they don't just tell your normal cells to grow. They can push already damaged cells into overdrive. And fourth, it needs supply lines. Tumors don't just appear fully formed, that they grow. And to grow, they need their own blood supply. The process by which tumors recruit new blood vessels to feed themselves is called angiogenesis. Certain foods and dietary patterns promote this process, others suppress it. So when you think about cancer, think about it like this. If cancer is a seed, these 4 things are the soil, the fuel, the fire, the signals, the supply lines. Change the soil and you change what can grow in it. That's what we're doing today. We're changing the soil. Now, before I go into the 4 food categories, I want to tell you about something that shocked me when I first came across the research. Something that shifted how I looked at the entire conversation around food and cancer, because when most people think about cancer-causing foods, they think about the obvious things: processed junk, fast food, too much sugar. Those conversations are important and we will get into them. But there is one category of foods that consistently flies under the radar, that I almost never hear discussed in mainstream health content, that is doing real damage to the bodies of people who genuinely believe they're eating well. And that's where we're starting. The first food category I want to talk about is what I call the healthy food trap. Let me paint you a picture. It's a Tuesday morning. Someone is trying to eat better. They skip the donuts at the office. They pack their own lunch. They grab a protein bar on the way out the door, some almond milk for their coffee, a gluten-free wrap because they read somewhere that gluten is inflammatory. They feel good about their choices. They feel responsible. And every single one of those items might be quietly contributing to an environment inside their gut that makes cancer easier to grow. How? Through something called emulsifiers. Emulsifiers are chemical compounds added to ultra processed foods to improve their texture, extend their shelf life, and keep ingredients from separating. They're in protein bars, they're in almond milk and oat milk. They're in gluten-free breads and wraps. They're in salad dressings, low-fat ice cream, packaged soups, and many of the foods that carry health claims on the front of the package. Here's why this matters. Your gut has a lining, a protective barrier made up of tightly connected cells with a thick layer of mucus sitting on top. That mucus layer is not just random goop. It is a physical shield between the contents of your digestive tract and your immune system. It's home to trillions of bacteria that keep your body balanced, your immune system calibrated, and your inflammation levels in check. Certain synthetic emulsifiers, particularly ones like polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, and carrageenan, have been shown in research to degrade that mucus layer, to thin it out, to disrupt the bacterial communities living within it. And when that barrier is compromised, things that are supposed to stay inside your gut start leaking through. Bacterial fragments, toxins, partially digested proteins. Your immune system sees these things, doesn't recognize them as safe, and mounts a response. That response is inflammation, not the short-term purposeful kind, the low-grade chronic simmering kind, the kind that over time creates the soil cancer needs to grow. They don't cause cancer directly. I want to be clear about that. This isn't about one protein bar giving you a tumor. This is about a pattern, about years of consistent exposure, creating a gut environment that is chronically inflamed, chronically disrupted, and therefore chronically more vulnerable. Think of it like this. Imagine removing the walls of your house, not all at once dramatically, just bit by bit, slowly, over years. At some point, you realize the house isn't protecting you the way it used to. Things are getting in that shouldn't, and you've been so comfortable in what felt like your home that you didn't even notice it was happening. That's what chronic emulsifier exposure can do to your gut barrier. So what do? Read labels. Seriously, flip the package over and look. You're watching for polysorbate 80, carboxymethylcellulose, sometimes listed as CMC, carrageenan, modified starches when they appear alongside long chemical names. The simpler the ingredient list, the better. I use what I call the grandma rule. If your grandmother wouldn't recognize every ingredient on that list as a real food, think twice. And here's a line I want you to take away from this section. Because if your body doesn't recognize it, it doesn't know how to protect you from it. That's the healthy food trap, the category of foods that look responsible from the outside but are doing invisible work on the inside. But even if you cleaned up your packaged foods completely, even if you committed to reading every label and cutting out every suspicious additive, there's still something else most people completely miss. Something that doesn't get added to food in a factory, something that grows on it. The second food category I want to talk about is what I call invisible contamination. Some of the most powerful cancer-causing compounds ever identified aren't chemicals that get added to food deliberately. They're not ingredients, they're contaminants. They grow on food during storage, often invisibly, under conditions of heat and humidity. They've been classified by international health authorities as among the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens we know of. These are called aflatoxins, Aflatoxins are toxins produced by certain strains of mold, primarily Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus. These molds grow on crops, particularly under hot and humid storage conditions, and the toxins they produce can survive cooking. You can't roast them away, you can't boil them out. Once they're in the food, they're in the food. Where are they found most commonly? Peanuts and peanut products, especially products made from bulk or lower quality peanut sources, corn and corn based products, tree nuts, particularly when purchased from unknown sources or stored improperly, certain grains, dried spices, especially in regions where storage conditions aren't tightly controlled. Now, I want to be clear about something important because this is the part that often gets misunderstood. The food itself isn't the problem. Peanuts aren't dangerous, corn isn't dangerous, nuts and grains are genuinely nutritious foods with real health benefits. The problem is the contamination. And the risk varies enormously depending on where you source these foods and how they're stored. But here's what makes aflatoxins particularly serious. This is one of the few naturally occurring substances known to directly damage DNA, not to create an environment that's vaguely more hospitable to cancer, to directly interfere with the genetic material inside your cells, specifically aflatoxin B1, the most common and most toxic form, and has been directly linked to liver cancer in populations with high long-term exposure. So what do you do with this information? You don't panic and stop eating nuts. You make smarter sourcing choices. Buy from reputable suppliers, not bulk bins from unknown sources where you can't verify storage conditions. Check for freshness. If something smells off, musty, or sour in a way that doesn't belong, don't eat it. Store nuts and grains properly, ideally in airtight containers in the refrigerator or freezer, because cold temperatures significantly slow mold growth. Buy smaller quantities and use them up within a reasonable time rather than store in large bags for months. And for peanut butter specifically, choose brands that use high quality sourcing standards and test for aflatoxins. Many of the major brands do. This isn't about fear. It's about awareness. Most people eating a reasonable diet in countries with strong food safety regulations are not at high risk from aflatoxins, but many people are consuming improperly stored nuts and grains without even thinking about it. And for something this serious, awareness costs you nothing. Now, the next one, you've heard about this before. I know you have, but I promise you, not like this. The third food category is what I call the fuel system, and it's built around something called the Warburg effect. In the 1920s, a German biochemist named Otto Warburg made an observation that would eventually win him a Nobel Prize. He noticed that cancer cells behave very differently from normal cells when it comes to energy. Normal cells are efficient. They use oxygen to convert glucose into energy in a clean, well-regulated process. Cancer cells, even in the presence of oxygen, prefer a different, much less efficient pathway. They burn through glucose at a dramatically accelerated rate. Why does this matter for you? Because it means that when you flood your body with glucose, you're not just fueling your normal cells, you're providing the preferred fuel source for cancer cells at an accelerated rate. Imagine your body is a city. Normal cells are like clean, efficient electric vehicles moving calmly through the streets using just what they need. Cancer cells are like old, broken down trucks with no fuel gauge, burning through everything in sight, producing smoke, creating chaos. The more fuel you flood into the city, the faster those trucks can run. But the glucose itself is only part of the story. The bigger issue is what glucose does to your hormone levels. Every time you eat something that spikes your blood sugar, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin's job is to escort that glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells. Normal, healthy process. The problem starts when this happens repeatedly throughout the day in large amounts. Because insulin is also a growth promoting hormone, it sends signals to your cells that say grow, divide, multiply. And when you have elevated insulin levels circulating in your blood most of the day, you're sending that growth signal constantly. There's also IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which rises in response to insulin and directly stimulates cell proliferation. In a healthy body, these hormones rise and fall in response to meals. They do their job and return to baseline. But in a body consuming a high sugar and high refined carbohydrate diet around the clock, they stay chronically elevated. And chronically elevated growth signals in a body that also has chronic inflammation and chronic gut disruption create an environment where damaged cells are less likely to be caught and more likely to keep dividing. Here's the line I want you to remember from this section. You're not just feeding the cancer, you're telling it to grow faster. So what does this look like practically? Because I'm not here to tell you never to eat a carbohydrate again. That's not sustainable, it's not accurate, and it's not what the science says. The goal is smarter carbohydrates. Carbohydrates that come packaged with fiber, which slows the release of glucose and blunts the insulin response. Carbohydrates that nourish your gut bacteria rather than bypassing them. White bread, white rice, and white pasta have had their fiber stripped out through processing. They digest quickly, spike blood sugar sharply, and trigger a significant insulin response. Swapping these for whole grains, or better yet, legumes like lentils and chickpeas, which are high in fiber and protein, blunts that spike considerably. Sugary drinks are one of the most significant sources of rapidly absorbed glucose in the modern diet. Soda, fruit juice, sports drinks, flavored coffees, replacing these with water, sparkling water, unsweetened tea, or coffee without added sugar removes a major driver of blood sugar spikes. Fresh fruit, which comes with fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants, is a genuinely healthy swap for refined sugar. And I want to add something here that I think often gets lost in the noise around sugar and carbohydrates. A diet rich in fiber does more than slow down glucose absorption. It feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Those bacteria produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids that actively suppress inflammation, support the integrity of your gut lining, and have been shown in research to have anti-cancer properties. So when you choose fiber-rich foods, you're not just avoiding a problem, you're building a solution. You don't need zero carbs, you need smarter carbs. That's the takeaway. And finally, the fourth category. This is the one people defend the most, the one that comes with the most pushback, the one where I consistently hear, but I only drink occasionally, or but red wine is good for you, isn't it? I want to address this carefully and honestly because the evidence here is clearer than most people realize. And I think you deserve to have that clarity, even if it's uncomfortable. The fourth food category is what I'm calling the social habit, and it's alcohol. Most people think moderate drinking is safe. The idea of a glass of red wine with dinner being heart healthy has been so thoroughly embedded in popular culture that questioning it feels almost contrarian. But when it comes specifically to cancer risk, the evidence tells a different story. The World Health Organization has classified alcohol as a group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco. Not because a glass of wine is equivalent to a cigarette. Risk levels absolutely differ based on quantity, but because the mechanism of harm is definitively established, it is not a maybe. The link between alcohol and cancer is not a correlation that might have alternative explanations. It is a documented biological process. Here's how it works. When your body metabolizes alcohol, it converts it into a compound called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is directly toxic to your DNA. It binds to your genetic material, causing breaks and mutations. It disrupts the proteins your cells use to repair those breaks. It interferes with the folate metabolism your body uses to build new accurate copies of DNA when cells divide. And it suppresses the immune surveillance that normally catches abnormal cells before they have a chance to grow. Put those together and you have a substance that damages DNA, prevents your body from repairing that damage, and lowers your immune system's ability to detect the damage that slipped through. It doesn't just cause damage, it makes your body easier to damage and harder to defend. The cancers most clearly linked to alcohol consumption include cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, colon, rectum, and breast. And these associations hold even at moderate levels of consumption, not just in heavy drinkers, not just in people who would self identify as having a drinking problem, even in people who consider themselves light to moderate social drinkers. Now, I'm not standing here telling you that you need to never touch a drink for the rest of your life. I'm not going to pretend that alcohol has no social function, no pleasure value, or that every person's life circumstances are identical. That's not what this is about. What I am telling you is this: the idea that moderate drinking is protective or neutral when it comes to cancer is not supported by current evidence. Less is genuinely better. Every drink you remove from your regular pattern reduces some amount of exposure to acetaldehyde. It allows your body to recover its repair mechanisms, restore its immune function, and reduce the chronic oxidative stress that alcohol generates. If you currently drink regularly, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to switch to red wine or to organic beer. It's to drink less frequently, to make it genuinely occasional rather than habitual, to create space for your body's defenses to do their job without constantly having to deal with the aftermath of acetaldehyde. That's the honest conversation. Not fear-based, not extreme, just clear. All right, let me bring all of this together. 4 categories, 4 things that create the exact environment cancer cells need to grow, divide, and take hold in your body. And the first is ultra-processed emulsifiers, the synthetic additives in packaged foods that degrade your gut lining, disrupt your microbiome, and drive the kind of chronic low-grade inflammation that creates hospitable soil for cancer. The fix is reading labels, choosing foods with simple, recognizable ingredients, and applying the grandma rule. If she wouldn't recognize it as a real food, reconsider. The second is aflatoxin contaminated foods, the naturally occurring mold toxins that grow on improperly stored nuts, corn, and grains, and that are among the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens we know of, with a direct ability to damage DNA. The fix is sourcing from reputable suppliers, storing these foods properly in cool, dry, airtight conditions, and trusting your senses when something doesn't smell right. The third is excess sugar and refined carbohydrates, the fuel system that cancer cells depend on and the driver of the chronic insulin and IGF-1 elevation that sends gross signals to cells throughout your body. The fix isn't eliminating carbohydrates. It's choosing fiber-rich, whole food sources that slow glucose release, nourish your gut bacteria, and support your body's natural defenses rather than undermining them. And the fourth is alcohol, the group 1 carcinogen that directly damages DNA, impairs your body's repair mechanisms, and lowers immune surveillance. The fix isn't an absolute prohibition for everyone. It's honest awareness. Less is better. Occasional is better than regular, and no amount is risk-free when it comes to cancer. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this: you are not fighting cancer. You're changing the environment it needs to survive. That shift in framing matters. Fighting implies you're reacting to something that's already happening. Changing the environment means you're acting before anything has to happen. You're making your body an inhospitable place for cancer to take root, not through dramatic, exhausting interventions, through the steady, consistent daily choices that don't feel dramatic at all in the moment, but compound over years into a body that is fundamentally more resilient. Whole foods over processed ones, simple ingredient list over paragraphs of chemical names, fiber-rich carbohydrates over stripped-down, fast-digesting ones, quality sourcing for nuts and grains, less alcohol, more consistently. These aren't deprivations, they're upgrades. They're choices that also happen to make you feel better, have more energy, sleep more soundly, and age more gracefully. The anti-cancer lifestyle is not a punishment. It's just living closer to the way your body was designed to be supported. I also want to say this because I think it's important. Please don't walk away from this video feeling overwhelmed. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You don't have to change everything at once. You don't have to be flawless. The body is remarkably resilient, And every positive change you make, however small it seems, is meaningful. One less sugary drink per day is meaningful. Reading one more label per week is meaningful. Storing your nuts in the refrigerator instead of in a bowl on the counter is meaningful. These things add up. What I want you to take from this is not anxiety. I want you to take agency, the feeling that you are not helpless here, that the environment inside your body is something you have genuine influence over, because you do. And that influence starts with knowing what you're working with. The wise seek knowledge because what you know today can protect your future tomorrow. That's not just a nice sentiment, it's the entire reason I do this work. Because the gap between what the research shows and what most people actually know about how their daily choices affect their long-term health is enormous. And that gap costs people their lives, not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly over decades in ways that could have been different. You watch this video. You took the time to understand something that most people will never bother to look into. That means something. It means you're the kind of person who takes your health seriously. And now you have tools that most people don't have. Use them. Share this with someone you care about, because this information shouldn't sit with just one person. And if what I shared today surprised you, if the emulsifier conversation changed how you look at your grocery cart, or the aflatoxin information made you think differently about how you store your food, or the alcohol research landed differently than you expected, wait until you see what I cover next. Because next we're going to talk about something that affects millions of people every single day, to the risk of dementia. And the connection is going to change how you think about something sitting in most people's medicine cabinets right now. That's next. Stay with me.